welcome to my channel if you're new. Welcome back if you're a subscriber. Today I will be talking about some more of my favorite books of 2022. I already put out a video with my absolute favorite books of the year, so I will link that above for you to check out. I would highly recommend checking out that video. I very passionately loved all of those books, and I think you should check it out and see if there's books you haven't heard of on that list, because I've actually had some people tell me that they hadn't heard of some of the books on that list. I do want to say that I actually forgot one of my books that was on my favorites list video when I was recording, so it's not in that other video. But I want to talk about this book that was on the list, but I forgot about it when I was filming, and it is Cirque, Berserk by Jessica Guess. And this book is so freaking fun, and I read this towards the beginning of last year, so I forgot that I had read it in 2022 while I was filming, but I definitely need you all to check this out if you're looking for a slasher with circus vibes that takes place in the 80s. It is so good, and I will say if slashers aren't generally your thing, I still think you might be really interested in this book because it kind of has another element to it that I don't want to go too into because it does get into spoilery territory. But this one you will totally fly through. It is a novella and it's only 167 pages. And this one is about a group of seniors and they decide to go to this abandoned theme park. And in that theme park, it was actually shut down years and years ago because a massacre occurred and they never found those responsible for the massacre. And so they decided it'll be fun to break into the circus and kind of look around and see if this legend was true, and let's just say chaos ensues. It is so much fun, so fast-paced. I love the retro vibes, and I just highly recommend you checking this out. The next book I want to talk about is When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. This one I can't find my copy for because okay, so I organized my bookshelves where it was like one book is facing out, one book has the spine facing forward, and it looks really aesthetic, but it makes for finding some books kind of difficult. So I couldn't find this one, not sure where it is. It's somewhere in my collection, but that's beside the point. I wanted to talk about this in this video because this was one of my favorite reads of last year. This one is about Mira, and she ran away from her segregated hometown after a tragedy occurred and hasn't returned since, but her best friend from childhood is having a wedding and she invites her to the wedding, and so she feels kind of obligated to go back to the town and attend her friend's wedding. However, it is taking place at a plantation, and this plantation is also the same one that she and her childhood friend Jessie snuck into, and it led to Jessie's arrest. And the land is rumored to be haunted by those who were enslaved on the property. So it has a supernatural element. It deals with real life horrors such as racism and what happened to these enslaved people in the past. And it's a really difficult read. There are some really hard passages, and at the end there's also a scene that was so disturbing. And I think the real horror in this book was scarier than the supernatural horror, but I really did enjoy that there was supernatural elements in it. And I will say that this one is very slow burn, so if you want to feel the heat of the South and kind of the suffocation that the main character is experiencing at this wedding, I would highly recommend it. It is very atmospheric, and I might recommend you to save this for the summer. Also, the writing is just stunning. It's beautiful. I had to reread some sentences in this to just experience the writing again. And also the audiobook narrator is excellent. I highly recommend the audiobook narrator for this. And also, I did a vlog reading this for reading Kayla from Books and Lala's audiobook recommendations. So she had highly suggested this audiobook, so I read it for that vlog. So if you're interested, I will link that vlog above as well to hear more of my thoughts. I would recommend this for people who like slow burn, more subdued horror elements, and who enjoy social commentary in their horror. All right, let's talk about one of my Lights Out Book Club picks for this past year. And if you don't know, I host the Lights Out Book Club, which is a monthly book club where I have a co-host who I invite on, and we read a kind of generally a newer release horror or thriller book. Sometimes we have more backlist books on there, but I chose this book as one of the selections, and I am so happy I did, and it is Gallows Hill by Darcy Coates. And this was my first Darcy Coates book, and it certainly will not be my last because I really loved it. And Darcy Coates is kind of known for cozy cozy horror. This, in my opinion, wasn't necessarily cozy. It was scary. It really had some disturbing scenes. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a cozy horror book. And I heard it's darker than a lot of her other books. And this one takes place on a haunted winery, which is such a fun setting. And it is about a woman who has inherited her parents' winery. They own this huge, well-known winery, but they have died under weird circumstances, and she wasn't prepared for this. But she has to go back to her childhood home and sort of tie up loose ends, figure out if she wants to own this winery anymore. Her family had employees there, so she has to decide, do I want to take the jobs from these people who've worked so hard? So she has a lot of difficult things to kind of go through, and she ends up staying at the house and experiencing some paranormal activity. This book is actually pretty long, and it didn't feel very long though because there was action going the whole entire time. There was some really, really scary scenes and amazing horror imagery. I feel like this could be adapted to a movie very, very well because of the setting and the atmosphere and the visuals. I just think it would transfer so well to screen. And oftentimes the books I enjoy the most are those that would transfer to screen really well. And also the ending is fabulous. I love the ending so much. The next book I want to talk about is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. And this I'm sure you've been seeing on so many people's favorites lists. And of course it made it to my runners up of the year because it was so well done. And this is a retelling of Carrie. And I've actually never read Carrie by Stephen King, and I haven't really wanted to, and especially after reading this one, I enjoyed this, so I kind of feel like it's fulfilled the role of Carrie in my life. I don't really need to read Stephen King's version because I kind of think I would like this one better, and I really, really enjoyed this book. So before I get into it, I would highly recommend listening to this on audiobook because it's told in sort of mixed media format. So there's a podcast element in this, and it has like a little jingle. You really feel like you're listening to a real podcast, and I really enjoy that. And it also has narrators, and it gives me a lot of Sadie vibes if you've read that book and listened to it on audiobook. So highly recommend reading it that way. But this one is about Maddie, who is a biracial teenager, and her town is having their first integrated prom, which was really surprising for me to find out because this book is so recent. I believe it takes place in 2014. I was really shocked that there were still segregated proms, but this opened my eyes to that. And so it deals with a lot of racial injustice in this book and social commentary, and you really, really are very emotionally invested in the main character. And this main character is being bullied for her race, and her dad is abusive, and there are a lot of trigger warnings in this. So make sure you look up those trigger warnings. It does go dark. It is technically YA, but Tiffany D. Jackson doesn't hold back in her books. She's a fantastic storyteller, and I always enjoy her books. I still have a few more to read, but this is one of my favorite of her books. This also was a book club pick, so I will link the live show above for that if you want to hear my thoughts, as well as my co-host thoughts on that. I forgot to say that Gallows Hill, my co-host was Sarah from Sarah's Shelves, and for this book, it was Erin from Erin Megan. So all their information will be in the description below. All right, so the next book I want to talk about, or kind of rather a series, is the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. This is technically a dark romance series, but I think it's very thriller heavy. I would recommend it for fans of Criminal Minds, but I would also recommend it to readers who like dark romance. Even though I don't read romance, this is kind of like the only dark romance book I've ever read, but I was more interested in it for the thriller elements and the horror elements. And I will say that this one too goes very dark. I was not really fully expecting it, but there were some very, very difficult scenes for me to read in this one because of the content in it. So look up trigger warnings for this. Just make sure you're okay with reading everything that goes down in this. There's a lot of triggers in this, specifically in some of the later books. But this one is about a female serial killer, and she falls in love with the FBI agent who is investigating her crimes, basically. And they start to have a relationship, which very much complicates things, and the detective doesn't know that she's the serial killer. And so she starts sort of like helping him with the case, but it's weird because he's trying to figure out who is in charge of the murder she's doing. So she gets kind of secret. She gets to see the FBI end and learn how to kind of make sure she's not caught. And it's very, very interesting. She is doing revenge killings. That's all you really need to know. Highly recommend this if you want sort of, I almost want to say a popcorn read, but it really isn't. The writing isn't fantastic or anything spectacular. It is sort of popcorny, but then like I said, there's some triggers, so it's hard to fully define this book. But if you want a fast read, it has all of the books on Kindle Unlimited. They're very, very short, and you would probably fly through these, and I really enjoyed how it ended and wrapped up. Let's talk about another revenge thriller, and it is The Collective by Alison Gaylin. It is a revenge thriller, and I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. It's really good, and it flew a little bit under the radar. Maybe people are talking about it, but I haven't seen a ton of people mention it. But this is about a mother who is obsessed with finding the man responsible for her daughter's death. And he has not been punished appropriately or anything. He's just basically gotten away with it. He's very privileged, and she decides she might want to take matters into her own hands. So this secret group of women sort of approach her. They call themselves the Collective. And so this group does revenge killings, and everyone in the Collective has a specific assignment in order to make this killing happen. And they don't really get any context. It basically says like, you take this car from point A to B with this passenger, and you don't really know anything about it, but you have these very specific roles that all contribute to the revenge killing. So she joins this group and she feels very vindicated to be doing so, but soon she starts to kind of question morality and justice and all of those things. And it's very interesting, and it makes you really, really think. And I thought the twist in this was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So I would highly recommend this. It's a very fast read. And also I do want to say, I just read The Last Invitation by Darby Kane for my book club. And I realized a lot of these were book club reads that I'm talking about, but that one I was highly, highly disappointed in because it was sort of marketed in a similar way to this. It was marketed as like the secret society, but it just didn't do what I wanted it to, but this book did exactly what I wanted it to. So if you weren't happy with that one, but you want to read a book with that similar concept, I would recommend this one. The next book is Good Rich People, and this is by Eliza Jane Brazier, or Eliza Jane Brazier. I'm not quite sure how to say this author's last name, but first of all, obsessed with the cover. And as soon as I saw this cover, I was very, very intrigued by this book. I needed to know what it was about, and this one has some mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people hate it. I'm on the camp of really, really loving it. This is the kind of book that you can't take too seriously. It is very satirical and has a lot of commentary on highly wealthy people who just have everything given to them and how out of touch they can be. So you just have to go in with a different mindset with this one, and I highly recommend it. This follows two women. One is a woman who lives in this huge mansion with her very successful husband. She's had everything given to her, and basically her husband and her play this game where they rent out their guest house to a tenant and then try to ruin their lives. And they do this just purely for entertainment, and they just have no regard for people who are less privileged and just find them and just consider them pawns, basically. So they love ruining people's lives. And it also follows a woman who is very poor in a very hard situation, and she somehow ends up working her way into their lives. I don't want to give anything else away. I thought this was a very fast, fun time. If you love rich people drama, if you love dry humor and just commentary in your books that makes you laugh at how absurd someone is, how they could even be thinking that way, I would pick up this book. All right, what would this list be without a Grady Hendrix book? And it is My Best Friend's Exorcism. And this book was such a fun time. I didn't love this one as much as the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, but it was pretty darn close, and I really, really enjoyed my time with this book. This is about two teenage girls, and they are best friends. And one of them starts to act weird after this one experience they have one night, and she seems very changed, and they begin to suspect that she might be possessed by a demon. That's literally all you need to know. It takes place in the 80s, so it has that retro 80s feel. It has a lot of pop culture references. Actually, every chapter begins with an 80s song, which is really cool. I know that there's like a playlist, I think on Spotify, that has all of the songs mentioned in this book. on that Spotify playlist. But this book also was made into a movie. I've heard the movie is bad and that they changed things, but this book was so much fun. The humor was there, the gore, everything that Grady Hendrix does so well. He simultaneously makes you feel very emotional for the characters and touched and all of that, but also disgusted by the gore, and there are some scary scenes as well. Highly recommend this if you want some great Grady energy in your life. I do want to say that this one isn't very scary, and it's mostly focused on friendship and humor, but with a little horror elements in it. And the audiobook narrator is so good in this one too. I would highly recommend the audiobook as well. The next book that I read back in October was Slewfoot, A Tale of Bewitchery by Brom. And this one was quite the journey for me. This is quite a long book. That's my only kind of critique of it. It really reads long because it has this formatting that is pretty wide on the page, but I highly recommend it. It is totally worth it. It's such a great story. It also has amazing artwork in the middle. I want to show you. Brom is a very, very talented author, but also a very talented illustrator. But this book is amazing for fans of The Witch. That's one of my favorite horror movies, and it's very slow burn, very slow moving, and this is kind of like this book. Extremely atmospheric though. This is about Abatha, who lives in a puritanical society where women get no rights. They are looked down upon and they have no respect. Soon her husband dies under suspicious circumstances though, and she is left alone and has to navigate what she's going to do and how she's going to try to keep their farm and how to fight for her freedom in this extremely repressive society. She also is rumored to be a witch, and this powerful force awakens when her husband dies, and she begins to form a relationship with him and practice possibly witchcraft. This one, the atmosphere is immediately stunning. I was listening to it on audiobook and just immediately was immersed in the world, which was such a cool experience when you just feel like you're literally opening a door and walking into a completely new world, time period, and atmosphere. So I love that about this book. The illustrations really added to it because when I was reading about some of the wild folk, I could turn and look at the artwork and really fully visualize the characters that I was supposed to be imagining in my head. I also just love the main character so much. She is such a strong lead, and she goes through a lot of emotions through this. She is trying to discover who she is, what she stands for, what she believes, and kind of wrestle with the fact that she's meeting this creature named Slewfoot, and they all think he's the devil, but he's helping her. And so she's sort of struggling with this, and it is so good. I love it so, so much. I highly recommend this one for all times of the year, but especially October and spooky season. It is perfect. The last book I want to talk about today is The Maid by Nita Prose, and I know that this book has received a lot of attention this year. It won the Best Thriller Mystery in the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I just know that so many people love this book. And it's becoming a movie, which I'm so excited about, but I definitely agree with so many people. This book was absolutely fantastic, and it is about Molly, who is a maid, and she's obsessed with cleaning. She really loves her job, she takes it very seriously, and she works for this luxurious hotel. Her whole life she's relied on her grandmother for social cues, but she has sadly passed away recently. So she's sort of navigating her life fully on her own for the first time. One day she is working and cleaning rooms, but she enters this hotel room and finds this infamous man lying dead in his bed, and she reports it to the police. But when the police start questioning her, she seems suspicious because of her social skills, and so she becomes sort of a murder suspect. And so she didn't do this murder, and so she has to sort of team up with her fellow employees to find who was responsible for this murder. So it's sort of a locked room mystery, and this one, as the reader, you sort of know what's going on because you're understanding all these social cues that are happening, but she's missing them. So there is a lot of character development in this book instead of actually trying to find out the mystery. There is sort of a surprising plot twist though that I didn't see coming, but I could see some readers getting frustrated like, oh my gosh, Molly's not understanding, you know, this evidence is right in front of her, or she's totally misreading this situation. But I actually think that's what makes this book so interesting and makes you so attached to the character. And hearing Molly's inner dialogue and thoughts are so funny. She is just so charming and smart and just, oh, so perfect. I freaking love Molly. She's amazing. So I highly recommend this book. It's very short and you can binge this really fast, and there are some extremely emotional parts in it. and I just hope I've sold you on this book and that you give it a shot because it's really fun. So those are my runner-ups, the books that I loved so much but didn't quite make it onto my favorites list, but I still absolutely adore. Let me know if you loved any of these books, which ones sound the most interesting to you, and if you've gotten this far, I would like you to leave an orange heart in the description. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye.